Hello, welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with Wicked, The Charm Circle Part 3. A few days later, Boq managed to catch Elphaba's eye in the break of their life science class, and they met above an alcove off the main corridor. "What do you think of this new Dr. Nikidik?" he asked. "I find it hard to listen," she said, "but that's because I still want to hear Dr. Dillamond, and I can't believe he's gone." On her face was a look of grave submission to impossible reality. "Well, that's one of the few things I'm curious about," he said. "You told me that about Dr. Dillamond's breakthrough. Did you know if his lab's been cleared out yet? Maybe there's something worth finding. You took notes for him. Couldn't be the basis of some proposal, or at least some further study." She looked at him with a weary, strong expression. "Do you think I'm not way ahead of you?" she asked. "Of course I went tramping through there the day his body was found, before anyone could lace up with the door with padlocks and binding spells." "Boq, do you take me for a fool?" "No, I don't take you for a fool, so tell me what you found," he said. "His findings are well hidden away," she said, "and though there are colossal holes in my training, I am studying it on my own." "You mean you're not going to show me?" He was shocked. "It was never your particular interest," she said. "Besides, until there's something to prove, what's the point? I don't think Dr. Dillamond was there yet." "I am a Munchkinlander," he answered profoundly. "Look, Elfie, you've more or less convinced me what the wizard is up to. The confining of animals back into farms, to give the dissatisfied Munchkinlander farmers the impression he's doing something for them, and also to provide forced labor for the sinking of useless wells. It's vile. But this also affects Wen Hardings and the town that sent me there. I have a right to know what you know. Maybe we can figure out together. Work to make change." "You have too much to lose," she said. "I'm going to take this on myself." "Take what on?" She only shook her head. "The less you know, the better, and I mean for your sake. Whoever killed Dr. Dillamond doesn't want his findings made public." "What kind of friend would I be to you if I put you at that risk, too?" "What kind of friend would I be if I didn't insist?" he retorted. But she wouldn't tell him. When he sat to her next during the rest of the class and passed her notes, she ignored them all. Later, he thought that they might have developed a genuine impasse in their friendship had the odd attack on the newcomer not occurred during that very session. Dr. Nikidik had been lecturing on the life force. Entwining around each wrist the two separate tendrils of his long, straggly beard, he spoke to failing tones that only of his first half of each sentence made it back to the room. Hardly a single student was following. When Dr. Nikidik took a small bottle from his vest pocket and mumbled something about extractive biological intention, only the students in the front row sat up and opened their eyes. For Boq and Elphaba and everyone else, the patter ran. "A little sauce for the soup," mumble, mumble, as if the creation were an unconcluded mumble, 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 notwithstanding the obligations of all sentient, mumble, 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 and so as the exercise to make the nodding off in the back of the mumble, 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 behind a little mundane article, courtesy of mumble, mumble, mumble. A frisson of excitement had woken everybody up. The doctor uncorked the smoky bottle and made a jerky movement. They could all see a small puff of dust, like an effervescence of tackle powder, jostle itself in a swimming plume in the air above the neck of the bottle. The doctor rode his hands a couple times to start air currents eddying upward. Keep some rare sort of spiritual coherence. The plume began to migrate upward and over. The oohs that the students were inclined were all postponed. Dr. Nikidik held a finger out to them to shush them, and they could tell why. A vast intake of breath would change the pattern of air currents and divert the floating musk of powder. But the students began to smile despite themselves. Above the stage, amid the standard ceremonial stag's horns and brass trumpet on braid, hung 4 oil portraits of the founding fathers of Ozma Towers. In their ancient garb and serious expressions, they looked down on today's students. If this biological intention were to apply to one of the founding fathers, what would he say, seeing men and women students get together in the Great Hall? What would he say about anything? It was a grand moment of anticipation. But when a door to the side of the stage opened, the mechanics of the air currents were disturbed. A student looked in, puzzled. A new student, oddly dressed in suede leggings and a white cotton shirt, with a pattern of blue diamonds tattooed on the dark skin of his face and hands. No one had seen him before, or anyone like him. Boq clutched Elphaba's hand tightly and whispered, "Look, a Winky!" And so, it seemed, a student from the Vinkus in strange ceremonial garb, coming late to class, opening the wrong door, confused and apologetic, but the door had shut behind him and locked on his front side, and there were no nearby seats in the front rows, so he dropped where he was and sat with his back against the door, hoping no doubt to look inconspicuous. "Drat and damn! The thing's been shaved off, of course," said Dr. Nikidik. "You fool! Why can't you come to class on time?" The shining mist, about the size of bouquet flowers, had veered upward in a draft, and it bypassed the ranks of long-dead dignitaries waiting an unexpected chance to speak again. Instead, it cloaked one of the racks of antlers, seemed for a few moments to hang itself on the twisted prong. "Well, I can scarcely hope to hear a word of wisdom from them, and I refuse to wake anyone with this precious commodity on classroom distraction," said Dr. Nikidik. "The research is still complete, and I thought that mumble, mumble, mumble. Let you discover for yourselves if mumble, mumble, mumble. I should hardly wish to prejudice your mumble." The antlers took a convulsive twist on the hall and wrenched themselves out on the oaken paneling. They tumbled and clattered to the floor, to the shrieking and laughing of the students, especially because the minute Dr. Nikidik didn't know what the uproar was about. He turned around in time to see the antlers right themselves and wait, quivering, twitching on the days like a fighting cock, all nastied up and ready to go to the ring. "Well, don't look at me," said Dr. Nikidik, collecting his books. "I didn't ask anything from you. Blame that one if you must." And he casually pointed to the Vinkus student, who was cowering so wide-eyed that the more cynical of the older students began to suspect this was all a setup. The antlers stood on their points and skittered and crab-like across the stage. As the students rose in a common scream, the antlers scrabbled up the body of the Vinkus boy and pinned him against the locked door. One wing of the rack caught him by the neck, shackling him in its V-yoke, and the other reared back in the air to stab him in the face. Dr. Nikidik tried to move fast and fell to an arthritic knee, but before he could right himself, two boys were up on the stage, out of the front row, grabbing the antlers and wrestling them to the ground. The Vinkus boy shrieked in a foreign tongue. "That's Cropin Tibet," said Boq, jousting Elphaba at the shoulder. "Look!" The sorcery students were all jumping to their seats and trying to lob the spells at the murderous antlers. And Cropin Tibet found their grips and lost them and found them again, till they at last succeeded in breaking off one of them, tying, then another, and then pieces, still watching, fell to the stage floor without further momentum. "Oh, that poor guy," said Boq, for the Vinkus student had slumped down and was volubly weeping behind his blue diamond hands. "I never seen a student from the Vinkus before. What an awful welcome to Shiz." The attack on the Vinkus student provoked gossip and speculation. In sorcery the next day, Glinda asked Miss Grayling to explain something. How could Dr. Nikidik extract a biological intention, or whatever it was? How could it fall under the heading of life sciences when it behaved like a master spell? What really is the difference between science and sorcery? "Ah," said Miss Grayling, choosing the moment to apply herself the care of her hair. "Science, my dears, is the systematic desiccation of nature, to reduce it to working parts that more or less obey universal laws. Sorcery moves in the opposite direction. It doesn't rend, it repairs. It is synthesis rather than analysis. It builds anew rather than revealing the old. In the hands of someone truly skilled, at this point she jabbed herself with a hairpin and yelped, is art. One might, in fact, call it superior or the finest art. If I pass as fine arts of painting and drama and recitation, it doesn't point or represent the world. It becomes a very noble calling. She began to weep softly with the force of her own rhetoric. Can there be a higher calling desired than to change the world? Not to join utopian blueprints, but really to order change? To revise the misshapen, reshape the mistaken, to justify the margins of this rag error of a universe? Through sorcery to survive? At tea time, still awed and amused, Glinda reported Miss Grayling's little heartfelt speech to the Throp sisters. Nessero says, only the unnamed God creates, Glinda. If Miss Grayling confuses sorcery with creation, she's in grave danger of corrupting your morals. Well, said Glinda, thinking of Alma Clutch on the bed of mental pain Glinda had once imagined for her. My morals aren't in the greatest shape to start out with, Nessa. Then if sorcery is to be helpful at all, it must be in reconstructing your character, said Nessero firmly. If you apply yourself in that direction, I expect it will be all right in the end. Use your talent at sorcery, don't be used by it. Glinda suspected that Nesseros might develop a knack for being witheringly superior. She winced in advance, even though while taking Nessero's suggestion to heart. But Elphaba said, Glinda, that was a good question. I wish Miss Grayling had answered it. The little nightmare with the antlers looked more like magic than science to me. The poor Vinkus fellow. Suppose we ask Dr. Nikidik next week? Who could ever have the courage to do that? Cried Glinda. Miss Grayling is at least ridiculous. Dr. Nikidik, with that lovable, bumbling, incoherent way he has, he's so indistinguished. At the life sciences lecture the following week, all eyes were on the new Vinkus boy. He arrived early and settled himself in the balcony, about as far from lectures as he could get. Boq had the suspicion nomads of all settled farmers possessed. But Boq had to admit that the expression in the new boy's eyes was intelligent. Averick, sliding into the seat next to Boq, said, He's a prince, they say. A prince without a purse or a throne. A pauper noble. In his particular tribe, I mean. He stays at the Osma Towers, and his name is Fiyero. He's a real winky, full blood. Wonder what he makes of civilization. If that was civilization last week, he must long for his own barbaric kind, said Elphaba from the seat on the other side of Boq. What's he wearing that silly paint for? Said Averick. He only draws attention to himself. And that skin, I wouldn't have the skin the color of shit. What a thing to say, Elphaba said. If you ask me, that's a shitty opinion. Oh, please, said Boq. Shut up. I forgot Elfie's skin is your issue, too, said Averick. Leave me out of this, she said. We just had lunch. You gave me dyspepsia, Averick. You and the beans we had at lunch. I'm changing my seat, warned Boq, but Dr. Nikidik came in just then. The class rose to the feet, a routine of respect, then settled back noisily, chummily chattering. For a few moments, Elphaba waved her hand to get the doctor's attention, but she was sitting too far back, and he was burbling on about something else. She finally leaned over to Boq and said, At recess, I'll change my seat and go forward so he can see me. Then the class watched as Dr. Nikidik finished his inaudible preamble and beckoned a student to open the same door at the side of the stage that Fiyero had stumbled through this week. In came a boy from 3 Creen, rolling a table like a tea tray. On it, crouched as if to make itself as small as possible, was a lion cub. Even from the balcony, they could sense the terror of the beast. Its tail, a little whip the color of smashed peanuts, lashed back and forth and its shoulders hunched. It had no mane to speak of yet. It was too tiny, but the tawny head twisted this way and that as if counting the threats. It opened its mouth in a little terrified yelp, the imminent form of an adult roar. All over the room, hearts melted, and people said, "Aww." "Hardly more than a kitten," said Dr. Nikidik. I had thought to call it purr, but it shivers more often than it purrs, so I called it burr instead. The creature looked at Dr. Nikidik and removed himself from the far end of the trolley. "Now the question of the morning is this," said Dr. Nikidik, picking up from somewhat skewed interest of Dr. Dillamond, who mumble. "Who can tell me if this is an animal or an animal?" Elphaba didn't wait to be called on. She stood up on the balcony and launched her answer out in a clear, strong voice. "Dr. Nikidik, the question you asked was, who can tell if this is an animal or an animal? It seems to me the answer is that its mother can. Where's its mother?" A buzz of amusement. "Caught in the swamp of semantics, I see," said the doctor merrily. He spoke louder, as if only now realizing there was a balcony in the hall. "Well done, miss. Let me rephrase the question. Will someone here venture a hypothesis as to the nature of the specimen, and give a reason for such an assessment? We'll see before a beast at a tender age, long before any such beast could command a language, if language were part of its makeup. Before language, assuming language, is this still an animal?" "I repeat my question, doctor," sang out Elphaba. "This is a very young cub. Where's its mother? Why is it taken from its mother at such an early age? How can it even be fed?" "Those are impertinent questions to the academic issue at hand," said the doctor. "Still, the youthful heart bleeds easily. The mother, shall we say, died in a sadly timed explosion. Let's presume, for the sake of argument, there's no way of telling whether this mother was a lioness or a lioness. After all, as you may have heard, some animals are going back to the wild to escape the implication of the current laws." Elphaba sat down, nonplussed. "It doesn't seem right to me," she said to Boq and Elphaba, "for the sake of a science lesson, to drag a cub in here without its mother. Look how terrified it is. It's shivering, and it can't be cold." Other students began to venture opinions, but the doctor shot them down one by one. The point being apparent that without any language or contextual clues, as its infant stage of the beast was not clearly animal or animal. "This has to be a political implication," said Elphaba loudly. "I thought this was life science, not current events." Boq and Elphaba shushed her. She was getting a terrible reputation as a loudmouth. The doctor dragged the episode long out after everyone had digested the point. But finally he turned and said, "Now, do you think that if we could categorize the part of the brain that develops language, we could eliminate the notion of pain and thus its existence?" Early tests on this little Tom lion shows interesting result. He had picked up a small hammer with a rubber head and a syringe. The beast drew itself up and hissed, and then back up and fell on the floor, and shrieked the door, which had closed and locked on this side as it had the previous week. But it was only Elphaba who was on her feet yelling. Half a dozen students were shouting to the doctor, "Pain? Eliminate pain? Look at the thing. It's terrified. It already gets pain. Don't do that. What are you, crazy?" The doctor paused, visibly tightening the grip on his mouth. "I will not preside over such a shocking refusal to learn," he said, affronted. "You are leaping to harebrained conclusions based on a sentiment and no observation. Bring the beast here. Bring it back. Young lady, I insist. I shall be quite cross." But the two girls from Briscoe Hall disobeyed and ran out of the room, carrying the clawed lion in an apron between them. The room collapsed in an uproar, and Dr. Nikidik walked off the stage. Elphaba turned to Boq and said, "Well, I guess I don't get to ask Linda's good question about the difference between science and sorcery, do I? We were definitely headed down a different path today," but her voice was shaky. "You felt for that beast, didn't you?" Boq was touched. "Elphie, you're trembling. I didn't mean this in an insulting way, but you've clearly gone white with passion. Come on, let's sneak out and get a tea at the cafe at the railway station for old time's sake. And that's the end of that chapter. See you later.